Hello, hello, and welcome to the Color Whisperer Show, where we talk about all things home and healing. And today we have a wonderful person to interview. Her name is Eva Vennari. She is a spiritual alchemist, and she educates worldwide on how overburdened and stuck adults can exit the endless grind and take charge of their well being to thrive in their lives. And I've had the pleasure of knowing this amazing woman for roughly 10 years. We'll figure that out. But she does so many amazing things, and you're going to be wowed by what she does and all the stuff she talks about. And, our health, it's physical, it's our body, it's our mind, and our spirit. And she helps heal all three. So, welcome, Eva.
Glad to be here. Hi. It has been, I've lost track of the years too. I don't know.
It's been a while. It was really funny. I had met somebody and they're like, "Oh, you got to meet this Eva lady. You got to meet this Eva lady." Da, da, da. And you had found somebody said, "Oh, you got to meet Jeanette. You got to meet Jeanette." And then we were at this networking event and we were going through names and they said your name, you said your name out loud. And I was like, "Oh, I got to go talk to her." So I went up and I said, "We're supposed to meet."
Yeah, and it wasn't even in the industry I'm in now because I was an architectural representative.
Right?
Yep, and working in natural stone industry. So I became your rep for, I think at the time it was Dow Tile, and then we went through all these other companies. But in the meantime, in the background, I started developing all of these gifts that I didn't know what to do with yet, until one day I did. And so I left the industry, and now I get to do this fun stuff that I do now.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And you've helped me with several things. I don't know what I would have done without those things. It's really been amazing. So, where do you want to start? Because you do all these really incredible things. So, do you want to start with like just our body health, or do you want to start with the physical, the mental and spiritual health?
Yeah, I mean, I want to have a little bit of fun with it, and
Okay.
that was like just based touching on where we started. And then everybody knows stone has energy to it, right? And I
Yes.
was one of the first to address how to use the natural stone slabs, in the house for countertop, for walls, for end tables, for headboards, as a means to solve a physical ailment for the clients. How do you want the space to feel? Not just look, like what do you want it to do? And people at first were looking at me like with the whole, I don't know, what are you doing, Eva? And uh, but that, energy work, that's something that came in with me. One of those things people call it being empathic, but I think it's more than that. I'm not reading so much the energy of around me in the way of adopting it. It's just like, okay, how is this affecting our bodies? And that became the focus of the healing and the healing work that I started to do. Because here's the fun thing: I'm a nerd and scientist at heart. So what makes the color in a natural stone is the same stuff that makes us up. So minerals make the color. Just like thinking about the what are those, the neon lights, right? So you have to have a certain mineral in the air in order for when you turn on the electricity to that bulb, then it shines a certain color based on the mineral. Same thing with when you're looking at stone. Natural stone has that, and those same minerals are, we're made of that. And if we don't have the preferred minerals in our body, it causes dysfunction. A lot of it, I found out. And so this then became my goal. Is like, how do I find out what the body actually needs to displace these toxins that we don't live in a bubble. So how do we do that in order to get rid of chronic illness? And that's what started it. That's what got the ball rolling. These questions.
So tell us about your story with chronic illness and what really led you down this path of healing.
Yeah, well, because I was dealing with over 30 different symptoms that collected over the years. It started with depression, and I guess that was my early teen years. And then it developed into autoimmune disorder with a bunch, the typical Epstein-Barr thing that they blame chronic fatigue on, and It's like, it turns out that wasn't why I had chronic fatigue. It just happens that my immune system was low because I was full of toxins. But I had to discover that. It took me 16 years of searching and barking up the wrong tree with doctors to collect all of these different diagnoses for which they said there's no cure. And I said, that's unacceptable. So I'm not going to talk to you people anymore. You are dismissed.
My body knows better. Woohoo!
You know, I'm an Italian and I'm stubborn and I use it to my will, not to, for good. This was the idea. If you give your body what it needs, it can heal itself. And so I was stumbling through the world, trying to get through. Why am I so chronically fatigued? And then raising kids at the same time. And, just dealing with all of these problems that kept me from being able to tuck my kids in at night. I was that tired. I couldn't get off the couch. So chronic fatigue, anxiety, insomnia, depression, fibromyalgia, skin, heart palpitations, short-term memory loss, arthritis, osteo. I was told I had going to be in a wheelchair by the age of 35. Short-term memory loss, the list goes on, including hypothyroidism, which a lot of people get that diagnosis and they think, oh, good, I'm on medication, I'm done. No, you're not. So that was my beginning of a very long journey of 16 years, like I said, to find the mineral balancing work that I now offer to help people overcome all of these seemingly unrelated problems. But you can overcome them without medications.
Yay. Because the medications often cause other issues, and the medications themselves say that, here's the side effects. If you take this medication for a long time, then you're going to need another medication for this. That's going to happen because this medication, it just becomes a very, long road of, well, here's another medication, here's another medication, here's another medication. And none of it's actually making you well.
No,
it's just blocking the symptom.
And it's also doing what I call creating a sticky spot. And this is where elementals and demonics, we're going to turn a corner in this world. You have these entities that are looking to, take over your body. And I'm not, if something's actually happening, then you're not imagining, you're being attacked. This is what's always going on. They say that evil never rests, and it's true. And so when you take a medication, anything that changes your physical body from being able to produce its own chemicals, you have the best pharmacy right here in the body, and employing that is the best chance by taking the minerals that we need. But when we take something systemically, it actually cuts off our connection to source.
Yeah, years ago I had depression bad, and it was when Zoloft was new. And I knew it. I mean, it took a lot for me to go, yes, indeed I'm depressed, and yes, I need to do something. But the doctor just said, here, you're going to take these. And I put them on. I started taking them, and I was like, there's something taking over my brain. And I was really freaking out because I could feel, and I'm like, this doesn't feel right. And back then they had all those commercials. You remember those commercials of, this is what Zoloft does to your brain? And I'm like, well, I guess it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, because my brain kind of feels like what the cartoon looks like. But at the same time, I was like, this doesn't feel good. And there are a lot of people who are on those drugs for decades. And I was like, I'm not doing this for a long time. I was very new in the world of woo back then. And I just knew, I said, this is not going to be a long-term thing for me. And maybe I need it right now because, the world was pretty dark, and I accepted the general rule of what to do at the time because I didn't have a better idea. But at the same time, I knew I had to find some other resolutions as well. And I took it for about 6 months. But I was like, there's no way I'm going to take this thing forever, because I could literally feel it changing my brain.
Yeah, it can change things. We think that feelings come first, and then our thoughts come afterwards. And it's a bigger story than that. it's the filters of our belief system through which we live our lives, and everything is pressed through, that says we have a judgment about what's going on. Because you can have two people go through the same traumatic event, one person come out okay and one person have PTSD. And that has to do with their filters. How do they believe in life? What are they thinking all the time? And so what their Zoloft was doing, as an example, is basically taking the filter out and just giving you, this is the good feeling. So those emotional places where we gain our insight, I call them our emotional GPS, become absent. So now we don't have the very tool that we need in order to navigate life and interpret our intuition and you know, how what we choose to do first, second, and third in life has to do with how we feel about it. And go, oh, that experience was terrible. I never want to do that again. Left turn. Or that experience was great. I like that. I want more of that. Let me do more. And so when you remove free will from our ability to function day to day, that's that source energy that gets completely cut off. I call that a violation of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and not only that, but medications don't pee out as much as we think they do. They store in our kidneys, our liver, or other organs, and that chemical buildup creates that magical word called inflammation. Everybody knows that, but they don't know really where it comes from. And so it's, as you can see, it's like one thing connects to another thing, and we can connect the dots more the larger we make the story, from the physical body all the way to our spiritual self, and that includes our environment of our home.
Oh yeah.
Because if you have things, elementals, and let's talk about what am I talking about? We're talking about demonics. We're talking about people are like, oh, Eva, the devil doesn't exist. Well, what am I exercising then? When I'm calling in angels and they're working with me and we're talking about, all right, we've got to close this hellhole, or we've got to, you know, somebody killed themselves in this spot, so let's heal that, because you can feel that in your home. If you ever moved into a house or been into a space and you feel kind of creeped out, you're like, wow, I want to buy this house, but I somehow don't feel like I can. Something happened there, you know?
And the way I put it is, if you ever walk in a room right after there's been an argument, and you just like, I want to, like, you just know, you know, and or if somebody's really sick and you walk into a house and you can still feel that, that sickness is good. And maybe they just died, the body's been removed, but the house still feels sick.
Yeah.
And it's because it's that energy that's still staying there.
Yeah.
So, you know, on a more tangible level of like people going, oh yeah, I felt that.
Yeah.
And you and I are pretty empathic and we feel a lot of stuff that a lot of people don't. But for people who may not be as tuned in as that, is like you walked in a room and somebody's arguing and you're just like, ooh, you know. And it's not just because they're there and they're embarrassed and or guilty or whatever. It's, and they don't want you there. It's like, no, there's an energy there that you're going away from.
Yeah, we feel our bodies have a much larger unseen force that is all around us. People hear the word auric field. It really is, you know, around the body, and it actually extends out as, you know, 9 meters or more outside of us. And that's why we know when somebody is walked in the room and is looking at us from far away. It's our bodies, you know, feeling each other. It's mystery stuff. It's fun to think about and to play with. But there are things to know, and if you know those details, then at least you can navigate and go, oh, that was just me picking up on another person. But in the case of picking up on energies, I think a lot of people discount their intuition. They think that they're not empathic when they actually are. The most common intuitive channel of being the 5 that match our physical senses, you know, sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. So we have mirrored the spiritual senses, clairvoyance, clairaudience, claircognizance is the one I was talking about. It's that gut feeling. So people who say, oh, I'm not psychic, I don't know. If you walk in a room and you know that you have a knowing, that's intuition. That knowing is you walked in and you're like, ooh, things are different here. You'd be really obtuse. I don't know very many obtuse people who are just so self-absorbed that they cannot feel when there was, you know, some sort of traumatic event in a place. I've not met very many people who can't even if they can't say things like I'm not a psychic, or they can't say I am psychic or I am intuitive, they'll admit, most people admit to, I just knew that. They have that killer cognizance is very common. So yeah, you have it. And here's the fun part. You can develop the other ones.
Yes. We went to, some friends and I went into the Ripley's building in St. Augustine, Florida, which is one of the most haunted places
Yes.
in the United States or is it the planet? It's supposed to be. So they take you to the museum. We went on a haunted tour. So they took us to the museum at night. And then the museum, it's the museum part, which is fine. And then they take us to the end, which the last room, and it's a southern home. And so the way a southern home is usually built is there's a drawing room and there's a living room. There's a place for the men to go do their thing and a place for the women to do their thing. And then they have a ball and they open up the door and it becomes one big room. So one of these rooms where they had opened up those doors, but one of these rooms was kind of like a huge bay. It was like a alcove, it was a huge alcove, right? And so I walked underneath the beam to go into the alcove. And I just said, you know what? I don't want to do this. And I didn't go in. I didn't really care. I just was like, yeah, I don't need to go back over there.
Mm-hmm.
My friends did, and they came back and like, oh yeah, something pricked my neck, and it was really cold, and it was this, and it was that, and so they didn't believe. One of my friends had some sight like me. The other friend, she didn't see nothing. She didn't believe nothing. But she's like, and you could hear everybody else whispering, it's really cold in there. Oh, I felt like something pricked my neck. I felt this, I felt that. What was really funny though is I had a ghost follow me home from that. That was interesting. So I had to call somebody. Fortunately, it was on the West Coast. It wasn't so late. And I'm like, help, what do I do? Because the girl thinks I can help her, and I don't know what to do except
Yeah.
say, go back home to mama.
Yeah, tell it no, you're not welcome.
Yeah. So, well, that was my first experience having a ghost latch onto me like that. So I was like, what do I do? Hey,
Me
Mark.
again. I had a quick question based on what you just said. Actually, I had a couple of quick questions based on what you just said and what Eva was saying and everything. But aren't ghosts like most people? Wouldn't they not want to be someplace that they're not used to? So the fact that the ghosts would want to go from the south to the west is kind of novel to me, because it seems to me that most ghosts would want to be in the environments of where they were originally from. But I could be wrong, so I'm not oftentimes wrong on a lot of things. But what's your thoughts around that, Eva? Because it seems to me that, like, I would think that the spirits would want to be around things that they are familiar with, for lack of a better term, and everything around those nature. So the fact that this ghost latched on to Jeanette from the south to come to the west, unless it had a West Coast tie, and maybe it had a West Coast tie, then I would be kind of curious about the reasoning behind the ghost, if that's a legitimate question.
Oh yeah, I've got lots of experience with this. I spent 10 years as I first started to really awaken, just ushering lost souls to the other side. So I'm one of those people who can create the light to heaven and then clean off the soul body and then let them move on. If they don't make it through that white light that everybody talks about right after death, there's like, you got a window of time, and if you miss it, you got to find somebody like me. So it may not be that the motivation of that ghost that latched on to Jeanette was looking for West Coast. It may be that they just liked her energy. I can't tell you the number of times I've walked into a castle or an old manor in England, anywhere here, where somebody goes, hey, like kind of like the little wolf whistle, hey, baby, can I come home with you? No, you can't. So some of them I ask, the conversation is up here. Telepathy. They're people. They were people with bodies. Now they're just people without bodies. They have motivations that are different, just like every other human being does. And so you ask them, do you want to leave? And most of them say, yeah, can you send me back? Yes, I can. Whenever you're ready, we can just do this and we'll have a quick conversation. We'll clear out anything that needs to be cleared, and off they go and they're done. But some people are like, oh gosh, was it Charles at Pendleton, his house in England? He came up to me as I'm looking at his childhood photo, and he goes, "That's me," in my ear. And I said, "Well, which one? Because there was two of you." And so he answers me up here, telepathy, and he said, "I'm Charles." And so I'm like, "Okay, so what's going on? You're just hanging out?" And mind you, there is a crowd. It's like this is a public, for public consumption now. Part of the house was open to the public. And he says, "Oh, this is my home, and I want to be here." Okay, so that's. I says, "All right, well, you just find me here whenever you're ready to go back, and I'll take care of it." And he goes, "Will do." And every once in a while, he pops in just to say hello, and then he's off again.
Well,
So
along the same kind of lines, because I've talked to Jeanette about this before, and she's aware of this. One of the places, because I do a variety of jobs, and one of the places I work at is a African American Cultural Arts Center that was a historical building that was actually created during the around the time of slavery or after slavery in Reconstruction in the late 1800s, and has some very rich history and all of that. So it's now converted. The church itself has moved to a different location and moved several decades ago, but it is now a converted building into an artistic building. But it is a lot of energy, both of people that have passed on recently, as well as those that were there in the church. And I don't know anybody that has worked at the building. It's a small staff, but we've had maybe close to 30 or 40 people, including board members, maybe even a little bit more than that, that has not had the experience of hearing dancing, hearing music, hearing footsteps. So everybody that goes to work there pretty much knows that the building has spirits that are comfortable, to use your words, with being in that area and respect that area and like to be in that area. And I don't know that they necessarily want to leave the area and everything. And they seem to enjoy it. And we seem to enjoy it as well. We sometimes have one of the running jokes I have is I'll sometimes have a conversation that if I'm staying too late at the night, that I might tell those spirits that, look, I'm going to let y'all have y'all's party. I don't want to be here with the party, with the ghost and everything. So I'm going to let y'all have the party. Just give me time to actually get myself together and go to catch, because I can get around by mass transit to go catch the bus and everything. Y'all can have the party and get your dance on and do everything else. Just give me time to get out of the building.
Yeah. But people get very scared of things they can't see, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it can be uncomfortable, but they really are just people without their bodies. That's it. And they can stay. So it's like, I'll find oftentimes young children who are stuck in manners, and they'll be in like the kids' playroom. And I'll be going through I do a lot of museums and a lot of travel. And so I'll come across somebody and there'll be a little library or a little seat, and I'll notice them. They know I can see them. And I go, "Hey, what are you doing? What's going on?" And they go, "Well, I've been trapped here. I stayed behind to be with my family who is still alive. You know, I died when I was 12, for example, and I'm stuck here." And so we send them on. So it depends. Do they want to stay or do they not want to stay? And then sometimes people are trapped here because they're attached to an object. They can be attached to, like, oh, it gets busy when you go to antique stores. Talk about energy.
Well, there's an antique store here in Durham. I've told you that I love its name, and I think it's been going on for a while and everything. But if I remember the thing, is the title of the store is Everything But Granny's Panties. That's literally the name of the store, and all along those sides. So that's literally the name of the store here in Durham, North Carolina. But the question I had for you, even, and then I had a more kind of question of this day and time and everything. But are there people in the energy space that are interested? Because I mean, I know what the Catholics think about purgatory, but there are people in the spirit lane that are interested in staying back and forth. Because, like I said, in my mind, one of my good friends that passed away here several years back and everything was a dance pioneer here in Durham, and a dance pioneer around the nation, and I would argue around the world, because he used to go to Africa regularly as well. But I personally think that he probably likes being in heaven, because that's where I personally like to think that Baba Chuck Davis went to and everything. But I also think that I would not be surprised if doing, say, Kwanzaa, which we just went through, or doing some other events that he was very much involved in, doesn't make return trips and everything. But I just wondered if that's something that can go on, where you're coming from the heavenly gates into the earthly realm, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, there are some rules around that. So if you've decided not to go through your own light, or requested to have somebody like me send you through, you're here just earthbound, and that's earthbound spirit is a body, or a human soul without a body. And oftentimes, we're talking about health here. How does this apply to health? those spirits will attach themselves, especially to relatives, and they'll attach themselves in the auric field of the person, creating an energy drain. So it's better, like, well, I'll communicate with them and I'll say, hey, did you know that you being attached to your relative, your loved one, the person that you love and care about, is suffering as a result of this attachment? Oh my God, no, I didn't know. They get really upset. And I go, okay, so here's the deal. I can clean you up, get you set up with the tools you need to complete whatever it is you want to complete. You got to go to the other side. And then every time any of your loved ones think of you or speak your name, you can come back with that permission slip. But otherwise, you're going to go.
Right.
I says, your time here is over. And so we have that conversation, and those are the rules around it. So if you think of somebody who's passed on, that thought is a permission slip. That's how we live forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's because those that we left behind who love us still, they think of us, and then we can come over. But when you're done, you do go back. And that's how the Ouija board works. That's how portals work. It's a lot of things, but you have to be, it's my preference that a person has good spiritual hygiene and closes up all of those things when they're done.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Then I'm going to get off and let you and Jeanette continue this vibrant conversation and everything. That just has two very quick questions. One is, you just mentioned something that I had not heard people mention since I was a kid and everything, even though I do know a number of people that still use them and everything. So are Ouija boards still popular? Because I remember when I was in high school and in college, they were very popular in certain folks enjoying using them and all along those lines, sometimes maybe not even understanding what they were using. But I know as a person is in my early 60s, so like around the 70s and the 80s, definitely a number of folks that were in that high school level and the college level used to play with them regularly. And like I said, sometimes you play with things that you don't quite understand, and that can be dangerous in my mind and everything. But I just wondering your thoughts around the popularity of the Ouija boards, because there was a time frame, but I definitely remember the 70s and the 80s when they were very popular, and you just used that term, and I'm going like, are Ouija still around?
They still sell them at Target. So I don't know how popular they are. They became, they were big. I remember because I lived that through that period also, and have used them many times. But I had discovered attachments were staying behind, and I thought better of continuing the use. I don't know that they're popular, but I do know what is. Magic, black magic in particular, has made a huge turn to be present. There's a lot of people trying to take away or push their will onto others, which is again a violation of the universe. And I'm telling you, if I catch you doing it, I will bind you magically. You will not be doing magic if you continue doing that. So
no, I can see that, and I know there's that whole conversation around if you use the Wizard of Oz, the good witch versus the bad witch kind of conversation that goes on.
Yes.
The serious question I had, I mean, not that these weren't serious questions, but the question I was going to have before I jump off again, and Jeanette knows I'll do that sometimes, is y'all were mentioning around pharmaceuticals and around the drugs and everything. I'm wondering, Eva, do you think that we as a society, because it's something I've heard a lot of people talk about, have become much overly medicated? I mean, I just said I'm in North Carolina, so North Carolina's got tons of pharmaceutical companies, unfortunately, and all along those lines. But it does seem to me that we are too quick to run to the medication and everything. But I just wanted your take on that, because that's something that scares me of a country and the world.
Yeah, and a very well placed fear. I think that when we don't trust in and have forgotten that we are designed perfectly to overcome imbalances, we're God designed. There's divinity within us that we are completely rejecting every time we take a medication. And I'm not saying that short-term use of it isn't useful. It's that, well, what created that problem in the first place? And let's take the effort, which takes time, to reverse that engineering so that you can function properly again. But look, being propped up on medication and preserved through the last 10 to 20 years of your life is what you're looking forward to if you start on medications. Because like Jeanette said, you take one, a year later, you're on 5 more because of those side effects. And then you can just multiply that out as you go. And we're meant to live with a lot of energy, natural energy, all the way through to the end of life. Like the only time we should feel like we're dying is when we're dying.
makes a lot of sense. I'm gonna turn you back over to Jeanette, but that's just a couple of questions that popped into my head and everything. So Jeanette knows I'll pop in and ask those sometimes. But I'm gonna turn you back to her very capable hands.
Oh, so we've gotten quite a bit of taste of a little bit of all the things that you do.
Yeah.
So I want to spend a few minutes and talk about how you roll them all together, because you have really incredible healthcare system that you've created using mind, body, and soul to create wellness on a level that I don't see very often.
No, the angels gifted me a name, the Spiritual Alchemist, and it came from that whole concept. It's when we do something and to the physical body, it can reflect itself in the emotional, mental, and then it definitely can reflect itself spiritually. And depending on where the trauma, whether it's like a car accident or a death in the family, or a death in the family that creates karma for you that you now have to deal with, all of that affects your health. And I came to realize that on my own journey of healing. So the first step was to become really comfortable and aware and understanding the mineral work. So the mineral balancing work was my main and only offer for 12 years, until finally I realized that my personal spiritual development relied on having that very fortified body. So first we start with that. Let's get the body fortified so that there's nothing in the way for our emotions, because we think about how we react. I was talking about earlier, those filters can be adjusted and changed with our mind. So we can choose what we believe. Beliefs are just thoughts we think over and over again. So I talk about boundaries. Who do we let into our lives? What do we listen to? Are we looking at the news all the time? Are we lying to ourselves or to others? And this is all part of, what I call the essential love work. Because I noticed on my own clients that the number one thread for all of these chronic illnesses people would come to me with was a lack of self-love. Oh, okay. So we need to work on boundaries. We need to work on how to communicate. We have, as an aside, the most number of midlife aged people single and trying to date, desperately failing on the planet at one time right now. I've never seen so much failing in my life. And that to me is an epidemic. And we need to heal that. So that became a focus to learn. And so on top of now I feel good in my body and I'm not so concerned with all of these symptoms. Now I can pay attention to that person outside of me and understand more. So like these things relate to each other. You could hit a physical plateau in your healing journey of your body if you have a stuck emotion and you don't know how to clear that, or you don't know how to resolve a conflict, or if you don't have those skill sets, develop them. So that's what I discovered. Those are the things that go together. Then as my spiritual work, and I mentioned, I spent 10 years guiding lost souls to the other side. That seemed to be my mission. I got to play Horus, right? Horus, is that the Egyptian god that?
I don't know.
I don't remember. I could have that wrong. Maybe somebody knows for sure and can put it in comments. But the idea was I was set to task, and people without their bodies were showing up in my house. And so my spiritual gifts started to be developed. And I discovered along the way that those who have a demonic force attached to them have the same symptoms as a person who is just minerally imbalanced. And wouldn't it be good to know if one's affecting the other and vice versa? Because you could be spinning your wheels doing something and hitting brick wall of plateau, or no longer making progress because you're not hitting on the full true holistic scale. You're just at physical or at mental. If you're going to a counselor and you're not making any headway in any of the other two, the counselor is not addressing the full scope of work. You got a spiritual thing going on and you're not making progress at the gym, you're not making progress with relationships. You got to solve the spiritual thing. So that's it. All together, it creates something I call ascension. And this is the full Monty. It's like the complete comprehensive work of everything that I've learned, not only from an unreal amount of certifications on healings, from mineral balancing to, you know, Insophic Ray Reiki. It's like the list is long. Add all of that in, play with it, and then you've got this ability then to read. You're learning the how your body communicates with you along the way. And so when you're done, you're becoming master of you, as opposed to looking to others for help, going to the doctor for help, going to your counselor for help. Not that you shouldn't ever go to anybody ever again, but at least you're going to go there with some knowledge ahead of time and go, I'm intuitively feeling that I have some sort of inflammation right here. Not sure what's going on, but left shoulder also means something feminine, right? Shoulder is bearing responsibility. So like, you can come in to see a doctor with a little bit more information than just fix me.
Oh yeah.
That's the practical use of this.
Right? Our bodies. So it's like, you've been to cathedrals in Europe, but we go into and as you know, 21st century folk, we go into cathedrals and we're like, oh, look, there's a beautiful stained glass window. Oh, look, here's a crypt of somebody who there's a, you know, a replica of their body on it. And we don't see the story, because those things were meant for people who couldn't read. And everything in that stained glass window tells a story. They talk about the apostles, and like Catholicism, all I remember is St. Peter has the keys, but each of the apostles has a symbol that, you know, we learned maybe in catechism and we forgot, you know, but because it's not something that's part of our daily lives, we don't think about it. We don't see it. And even the colors in the mean something. And there's little movements that mean something. When you're looking at the crypts, and, you know, is the sword by their side? Is the sword across them? Is there, is the dog underneath their head as a pillow? Is it at their feet? Is it, all of these things mean something that you and I, we were never, well, okay, you and I maybe were taught a little bit because we have an interest in these things, but our world is not taught this unless you're going to a cathedral and you ask questions, and maybe the docent knows, you know, but that's not our way of communication. And so we're used to, oh, well, here's a plaque that tells us what this thing says, instead of being able to look at it and go, oh, yes, there's a lot of messages here. And so our bodies are the same thing. Each part of our body, each organ has a message, and we're never taught how to read that book. How to, you know, we're not given that manual, because it's not something we've been taught to, let's, you know, well, I go to the doctor and the doctor fixes it. Well, the doctor doesn't have that manual either.
Yeah.
So the more we can be aware of what that manual is, and aware of really what is our body actually telling us, we have so much more power.
Yeah, we do. And that's the key to everything. I was, so after my ex-husband, he passed away 12 years after the divorce, and he decided to attach himself. That's how I learned about the spiritual attachment, because I started feeling even more lethargic. I couldn't think, foggy thinking, and I was like, oh God, I need more sleep. I don't know what's going on. He attached himself to my auric field, and I could actually hear him in my head. And I knew it was coming from outside of me, because it wasn't telepathic. It was just here. And I thought, oh God, I divorced this man. I really don't want to hear him and his death, let alone, you know, this is not what I want. And so I learned about what's called a psychic surgery to remove him from my body and then send him on. This was before I realized I was one of those people who could create the light and move people through. So this psychic surgeon, I talk about medicine that medicine doesn't know. So the psychic surgeon, she goes, yeah, okay, we'll go into the contract room. And a lot of people in the spiritual world have heard of a contract, but they maybe not have heard of the contract room. The contract room is a sacred place where you meet up with this person that you need to close out your contracts with. And who is there is one of Archangel Michael's soldiers. And not Archangel Michael himself. He's busy like Jesus doing other things. Like, don't bother him. He's got soldiers, right? So I work with the soldiers and I work with the angels. And so there in that room is this huge fireplace, and he's standing over here just to the right of the fireplace. And we're done clearing the contracts, and he's quiet the whole time. And finally, at the end, he turns to me and he says, and I hear him here, telepathy, and he says, okay, now it's your turn. You're going to create the light, and you're going to clean off his soul body, and you're going to send him on. And I, being the lippy person that I am, said, you're the angel. Why don't you do it? And he says, you're the human. Angels are there to help us. They can heal us. They can, but they're doing this until we ask for help. And he taught me. He said, this is part of your spiritual gift set. You're supposed to learn how to do this, that you can help people through. This whole situation was meant to help guide you and train you and teach you. Now, these are things that I gleaned from that. The angel only said, you're the human. But I gathered that as, there is value in this clay body that is connected to the earth while we're on it. And spiritually, our chakras attach us to our source energy while we're here. This is what gives us the magic power. So why do demons want us? Because they don't have that ability. And that's the motivation. They want in, they want to attach, they want to go to heaven because they're not allowed there. And what do? They want to hitch a ride on us when we die. No. No. Protect your free will.
Yeah.
Protect your sovereignty. Understand that you have a responsibility for it. These are the biggest messages. And how do you do that? Well, this is what I solve. I take all the guesswork about all of that. And it's a big job. It's a big chunk of, like, how do you describe that? I don't know. I'm still working on it. There's a lot to this work. How do you ascend? You cannot ascend without your body. And I'm not saying die. I'm talking about go to the next level of your own expansion. How do you do that? You continue to pull away anything that doesn't belong.
It's me again. Speaking of ascending, because you said something very powerful earlier, and I was really resonating with that, and I was resonating for a couple of reasons, which is this notion of people being in that single space and the amount of single people that are out there that are chasing something. I'm probably guilty of that myself in the 60s and everything, but I sometimes find that that's two things going on. Sometimes you are afraid to ask the people that you might need to ask that are your soulmates, but also sometimes the soulmates aren't willing to accept their gift the self and are too busy with their own kind of barriers as well. So it's one that deals with that part of the spiritual world. What is your thoughts around that? Because I do think that there's a lot of that conversation that goes on in that notion of rejection and even acceptance of oneself in the soulmate journey, and why there's a lot of people that are looking for love in all the wrong places, if I can use that analogy.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is to realize that you don't have one soulmate. So there's an opening to that. Like, don't get stuck on the idea that you have to be attached to this one person that you find you're like, you are perfect for me and I want you. Like, first of all, that's desperate. So, but you know, we attract each other, right? Law of attraction says we're going to bring in the people that are our soulmates. Well, what is a soulmate? We go back to contracts. So before we drank the wine of forgetfulness and took over possession of our own bodies as we were born, we sat down across from each other and says, so I want you to bug the crap out of me for my spiritual expansion. What can I do for you? And we agreed to these things. We don't remember them, but we did. And so when we meet somebody and who's not in the place that we are, maybe there's still something in you that's vibrating at the level that they are that you need to fix. So use that as a guidepost. The other option, because I'm tired of being spiritually bullied and saying, well, it must be something within you. Not always. Sometimes it's just you're the rose and everybody likes to smell the rose. Like cause and effect.
Well, everybody loves to smell the rose, and I can definitely know about that spiritual bullying because I have had the pleasure or the ill pleasure of dating some church women, and sometimes the people that are in the church are ready to make that notion that you are the chosen one for that person, and you're still trying to figure out if you love them yourself, much less trying to have other people influence the decision. But they're sitting there going like, yes, y'all two are meant for each other, y'all are going to be perfect, and you're sitting there going like, wait a minute, I haven't even decided whether I like them yet, and y'all are ready to declare us husband and wife and everything.
Yeah, it's your free will has to be taken into account. So you could be ready, you could find the person attractive, but they could have a spiritual contract that maybe you don't want to endeavor. So I'll give you an example, and similar to what you're talking about. I found somebody that we had connected on an energetic space, and I thought, oh wow, what a really interesting person. I want to get to know him better. Well, while I was getting to know him better, he was also dating an ex-girlfriend. Didn't tell me.
Wow.
And he called me up one day on the same day as our next date. And he says, yeah, I'm going to have to not show up for the date. And I says, what's going on? And he says, well, I've decided to go back to my ex-girlfriend. Well, anytime you're going backwards, that means you haven't learned a lesson.
Right.
So for me, I decided, and I said to him after interviewing a little bit more, because I was very curious. And I says, I think my spirit has decided to decline the offer to learn whatever lesson it is you need to learn.
Sometimes you got to tell folks adios and bye, because I know I did that, literally walked out of relationships. So sometimes you have learned the lesson and it's time to walk away from it and everything. Another thing that I was just thinking about, because it was about that notion of spirits and people being in crypts and all along those lines. Because if I remember correctly, and I can look it up, it's kind of what y'all were looking up with the Egyptian gods and everything. I want to say that Duke, which is not that far from where I live and everything in Durham, got a very big Methodist tradition. And I want to say that their big church that is very popular, Duke Chapel and everything, that there are actually bodies in that church, because I think they have some crypts there and everything. And I think that some people are sometimes startled by that and are sometimes not knowing how to handle that and all along those lines. So I just wanted your thoughts around that, because sometimes in these historical buildings, and it might not be Duke, but I know there are other ones that they do have crypt bodies within those churches, and I know that exists. And sometimes, particularly our young folks, because sometimes that's who's going to college, they're sitting there going, wait a minute, I don't know if I can handle this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we think about it, the only thing that makes the body worthwhile is our spirit in it. So as soon as it leaves, the body becomes a shell and there's nothing. So that's then becomes our own need for attachment to have the body around. I kind of am of the mind of let the earth reabsorb the person, don't preserve it in a box. That's my mind. But and I'm going to share a little secret too. People are afraid of dead bodies because they think the spirit is somewhere nearby. Ghosts, I tell you, the quietest place in the world for any human is the cemetery. Ghosts don't like to hang out where there's no humans. Right. They're going to be in the places where there's energy for them to be able to pull from all of the other humans who are still alive, so that they can enjoy the space too. Yeah. So now you're thinking, I'm going to avoid crowded spaces.
Well, I do event planning, but I was actually having a funnier thought, and I'm gonna definitely turn it back over to you, Jeanette, like I did earlier and everything. But I'm thinking, because I am a sports fan, and particularly around basketball and football, so I'm thinking that this Saturday and Sunday there might be a whole lot of ghosts running around those NFL stadiums, because that would be where there would be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people and everything. So I'm thinking that those ghosts might be really at like those games that are going on, whether it's Buffalo or Kansas City or a number of the other folks, because that would be a whole lot of people.
Especially if they were sports fans, they're in their life, and so they're going to hang out and do the things that they enjoyed doing when they were alive. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. These are fun. I have been collecting ghost stories since I was a kid, not really knowing why. I've just always had an interest in it, and I would ask people, have you ever seen a ghost? Like the innocent kid. Have you ever seen a ghost? I want a ghost story. And I collected them over the years, and my own. I've so many. It's fun.
I've had some fun ghost stories too, and people are like, "You've seen a ghost?" I'm like, "Yeah," and
surprise me again, because that's what Jeanette had another guest on before, and I have heard ghosts, I have felt ghosts, I have done a lot of those things that are related to ghosts, but fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your point of view, because I do watch enough movies, I have not physically seen a ghost, and I'm not sure how I would feel if Uncle Randy popped into the room and everything, because that's an uncle that recently passed and everything along those lines. So I'm not sure how I would feel if I physically saw him in physical form and all along those lines. So that's one question I was asking. When people say they see in ghosts, do they actually see the physical body and the physical form, or is it more what you just described, Eva, which is that you're hearing the voice, you're hearing them giving you messages and all along those lines? Because like I said, I loved him dearly. He was a little bit harsh in some of his personality, but I still loved him dearly. But I'm not sure how I would feel if like Uncle Randy popped up into a chair nearby and started like telling me his thoughts of my life and everything.
and lit a cigarette. Yeah, this is so both. It can be any of these things, and I can't say that it's with permission either, because so on my wedding night, which a crazy time for a ghost to show up, we are at Prim at the Prima Donna, and I'm in bed, I'm sleeping, and I hear footsteps coming down the hall of the hotel, and the door definitely opened, and that's what woke me fully. The door opened, shoved open, and then closed. And then there was a ghost, and I could see her with my eyes, because I kind of looked at the foot of the bed from the pillows, and there was this woman, and I could see what she was dressed in, blonde hair and all this, and I go, oh, it's a ghost, and I put my head back on the pillow and fell back asleep. So we don't really know how we're going to react until we're in that moment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like you said,
everybody has different clairs. So sometimes I tend to hear more than I see.
Right.
And so it depends on what is more susceptible for you, which sense you're more comfortable with getting it from. I had a client, I had an Uber one time, and the guy was like in his 60s, and I guess his dad had recently passed, and his dad shows up in the passenger seat, and he says, I need you to tell him stuff, but you can't tell him I'm here. He made it very clear I couldn't tell him that he was there. I'm like, well, you're going to have to steer the conversation then, because what am I supposed to do? If I can't tell him you're there. So this man clearly couldn't handle the fact that I could have seen his father, but he needed that information. So if you may not be able to go, oh, well, maybe Uncle Randy, seeing him might be too much for you. Hearing him may not be too much for you. Smelling his cologne. So you ever walk down someplace, maybe in your house, and like all of a sudden you smell perfume or like a weird smell, and you're like, I don't have that perfume, or I didn't make that. Where's that smell coming from? So that could be a ghost right there.
I think mine is more auditory, because even in this apartment, and definitely at Haiti, I have definitely heard, like I said before, dance steps, and I've definitely heard knocks that don't make any sense. Like at 2:00 in the morning, you're going like, who's knocking on my door? And it's not the neighbors or anything along those lines. So I think mine is more auditory.
That's where you're comfortable receiving the information.
Right.
Yeah, and all my clairs are open, so I get them all. I've closed my house off since, and I don't allow just any willy-nilly ghost to come into my house. They're now under control. Only people who get in are relatives, and so that's an important distinction too. So like when my grandmother came to visit, she gave me the taste of her famous blueberry pie. There was a gentleman who was, before I closed my house off, he liked to wear a certain cologne, and every time he was around, I could smell his cologne. I had just started to date somebody whose grandmother had passed, and she was very overprotective of him. And so as soon as I got off the phone with him one time, she comes right into me, and I could see her blue dress and her glasses and her black hair. And I described her to him, and he went, oh yeah, that's my grandma. So whatever clair you have open, and the way in which the apparition, the person, wants to communicate with you, in those combination, you'll receive them.
Yeah, I can definitely, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm surprised that you only have the relatives, but maybe not, because I have such a deep friend circle that are like relatives that I think they're probably open a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I've closed off. I use mystery school magic to close off my home to just anybody, because it used to be like Grand Central in this house, and that's not okay. You don't want your house being like that. So I've closed it off, and I use salts, and I use magic, and I use all kinds of things to make sure that I'm sovereign in my own space. But yeah, relatives, friends, people that you know, people that you love, they can find their way to you, because that's the natural way of it. And when they pass, guess what you get to receive? You get to inherit something of theirs.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, this has been a very fast hour, so I want you to take a few minutes, plug yourself, and what you do is truly amazing, and we've touched on so much, but we've barely scratched the surface. So take what we can go over a little bit. We're not gonna like shut off exactly itself. So.
That's okay.
But I want to have you to have the opportunity to really tell people exactly what how you serve the world.
Yeah, and it's really customizable because every problem is like a thumbprint, right? And so what I do, you can find me on my website, which is theelevateinstitute.com. And you can just go to the start here. You'll see it at the bottom of the homepage. Start here and get the 20-minute phone call. That's free. So the most important thing I do is listen. So when we get on that phone call, I'm spending the first 15 minutes listening to what the problems are. Are they physical? Are they spiritual? Are they mental? Are they emotional? What is going on? And I will tell you whether or not I can help you, which is that's honest. My job is to be transparent, and I'm here in service. And I'll create your own package. And I'll say, all right, this is something you can step into, or we can augment that with this other part of the program, because I don't expect anybody to know what I offer as a complete. That's impossible. There's too much. You might need a soul retrieval. You might need, to clear out ancestral wounds. But you won't know that until we talk. And then I'll be able to write up I'm not using it in the medical way, but a prescription of here's what I believe would best serve you. And then we'll design your package for you, whether that's one session or, a full year of intensive work. It's up to you what you want to achieve. So I base that all on the problems that you're having. Even if it's just, I want longevity. If you want to clear away all of the guesswork around longevity, it's the same solution that it is to clear a chronic illness. So start here. Just go to theelevateinstitute.com, scroll to the bottom of the page and click on that start here, get on the calendar, and we'll have a conversation. And that's the best way to move forward.
That's awesome. All right. So now we get to go to Can Do Spice. And I think you'll like Can Do Spice. She's very much in the same vein as you and I, and very big on having healthy food to keep a healthy body. So thank you, Eva, for coming on. And if you want to come on again another time, because I know we've just barely scratched the surface today. So this was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right. And off we go to Can Do Spice.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.